Welcome to Channel Today in History. In today's video we will talk about the day September 26, 1918. Meuse-Argonne Offensive. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, also called the Battle of the Argonne Forest, was part of the final Allied offensive during World War I that took place along the Western Front. The entire offensive was planned by the French commander Ferdinand Foch, who sought to violate the so-called Hindenburg Line, and thereby issue an ultimatum and force the Germans to capitulate. During September and October the Allies crossed the line in several directions, north, center and south, operations that included the Battle of the Argonne Forest and carried out what is commonly referred to as the Great Offensive, also called the Campaign of the 100 Days. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, in addition to the American forces, involved the armies of France, the United Kingdom, and several countries of the so-called Commonwealth, mainly Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as the participation of Belgium, which was in the biggest battles throughout all the front. The ability of the Franco-British armies to fight uninterruptedly through the 4 years of conflict is pointed out as the cause of the bloody stalemate of the war. This resistance helped to break the fighting spirit of the Germans on the Western Front. The Grand Offensive, which included British, French and Belgian advances to the north along with the Franco-American offensive in the Argonne Forest, is singled out as the decisive factor that led to the signing of the armistice on November 11. On September 26 the Americans began marching to Sedan, located to the south. British and Belgian divisions headed for Ghent, Belgium on the 27th, and the British and French attacked northern France on the 28th, the hopes of victories on the part of the Germans. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, which joined American troops with those of the French Fourth Army, was the largest operation and victory of the American Expeditionary Force, AEF, in World War I. The main force of the AEF did not enter into operation until 1918. This battle represented the greatest commitment of the Americans in the war, and also where the greatest number of casualties occurred in the country. Even so, the Americans weren't the biggest force on the front. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive involved 9 American divisions of the First Army, commanded by John Pershing, against 31 divisions of the French Fourth Army, equivalent to 15 American divisions, led by Henri Gouraud. The main American effort in the Meuse-Argonne Offensive took place in the so-called Verdun sector, on the northern outskirts of the city of Verdun, between September 26 and November 11, 1918. Another American participation was further north, when the 27th and 30th Divisions of the 2nd AEF Group assisted the exhausted troops of the 1st Australian Imperial Force. With British artillery and tanks, combined with the forces of the three nations, the Allies attacked and captured the village of Montbretagne, 4 miles from the line between Bellicourt and Vendeuil, when the Battle of the Channel of St. Quentin took place. Of the 2 battles involving the Americans in the Grand Offensive, this was actually the most significant in terms of getting a major breach in the Hindenburg Line, on October 10. Forces at war in Argonne. The 9 U.S. divisions, Patterson, 2005, of the U.S. First Army were commanded by General John J. Pershing until October 16, and then by Lieutenant General Hunter Liggett. More than 1.3 million American soldiers took part in the battle. Logistics were planned and coordinated by Colonel George Marshall. The French forces of the 31 divisions of the Fourth Army led by Henri Gouraud, a veteran of the Dardanelles where he had lost an arm in battle, and who was known to have led these forces through most of 1916, had taken command again in July 1917. German enemies remained with only about 50% of their forces at the start of the conflict. The 117th Division, which faced the 79th American Division during the first phase, had only 3,300 soldiers. Morals varied widely in the different German units. The Western Front forces kept morale high, unlike the Eastern Front. German resistance was increased to about 450,000 soldiers with the reinforcement of the German Fifth Army commanded by General George von der Marwitz. Goal. At Sedan, the aim was to capture railways and disrupt German supply lines in France and Flanders. First phase, September 26 to October 3. The American attack began at 5:30 a.m. on September 26. The results were variable. The 5th and 3rd groupings achieved most of their objectives, but the 79th Division failed to capture Montfuncton, the 28th Keystone Division encountered strong enemy resistance, and the 91st Wild West Division was forced to evacuate the village of Epinonville after advancing 8 kilometers. Montfaucon d'Argonne was captured on the first day by the 37th Buckeye Division. The next day, most of the First Army failed to achieve positive results. The 79th Division finally managed to take Montfuncton, and the 35th Sante Fe Division captured the villages of Balny, Hill 218, and Charpentry. On September 29, 6 new German divisions were mobilized to repel the American attack, with the 5th Guard and 52nd Division attacking the 35th Division. The adjacent French offensive was temporarily confused when one of the generals died. The French's initial progress was slow, but then they overtook American troops. Second phase, October 4 to October 26. A German Hanover CL-3 plane crashed between Montfaucon and Sierges on October 4. The 82nd Division 328th Infantry Regiment advances to capture Hill 223 on October 7, 1918. The second phase of the battle begins on October 4, when the American divisions of the first phase were replaced by the reserve divisions of the 1st and 5th groupings. The Americans carried out a series of frontal attacks and finally broke through the main enemy defense, the Kriemhilde Stellung of the Hindenburg Line, on 14 to 17 October. In late October, the Americans advanced 50 kilometers and finally cleared the Argonne Forest. This was during the operation in which Corporal, later Sergeant, Alvin York carried out his famous capture of 132 German prisoners, played by Gary Cooper in the 1941 film Sergeant York. On the left flank, the French advanced 30 kilometers and crossed the Aisne River. Third phase, 26th of October to 10th of November. American forces reorganized into 2 armies. The first, led by General Liggett, was to continue moving along the Carrigan-Sedan-Lisieux Railway. The second, with Lieutenant General Robert L. Bullard, headed for Metz. The 2 armies encountered what was left of 31 German divisions. The Americans captured the enemy's fortifications in Beaugency. The objective, Sedan and its strategic railroad, was reached on November 6. The battle in history. Of the isolated battles, this is probably the bloodiest in American history, with a large number of U.S. soldiers killed. Did you like the video? In the description you will find the blog link with the full article. Give an incentive by subscribing to the channel, liking, commenting, and sharing with your friends. Hugs. Until the next.